willing to listen.
Well, I really enjoy this program today.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
May God bless every person.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining us on another magnificent Monday's edition of our monthly Mental Health Matters. We'll be talking about the collective trauma of a multi-year pandemic. I probably insert, a multi-universe or a multi-century, but we're going to have a chance to chat with Dr. Alexandra Borden and Ms. Raquel Tobian, together with two of our students from UCCI. So please stay tuned for Talk Today.
Talk Today is brought to you by Subway, open 24 hours in Countryside, Anderson Square in Georgetown, and Centennial Towers in West Bay. And by the Ministry of District Administration, Tourism and Transport. Explore your history, explore your land, explore your sister islands. MedLab in Smith Road Plaza, your complete medical laboratory solution. Call 949-7331. And Savannah Pharmacy in Countryside Shopping Village, convenient opening hours including Sundays and holidays.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email Talk Today at candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255. Courtesy of Flow,
Cayman's #1 network that connects you to your world like never before.
Let your voice be heard. Once again, here's your host, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome back. And thanks again for joining us as we invite you to be a part of our monthly Mental Health Matters. Dr. Alexandra Borden, her colleague Ms. Raquel Tobian, and two of our students over at UCCI joins us for this month's topic. And I think a timely one, Dr. Borden, as I always appreciate not just your wonderful assembly of guests and topics, but the way we facilitate the discussion. So special welcome and good afternoon to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having us, and thank you again to our guest. I agree. I think we've done a lot of talking about the pandemic. I think that this is a really interesting time to kind of reflect on the bigger picture of everything that's going on right now as well. I know in recent shows we've done a lot with kind of managing stress and navigating the pandemic, but to kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture of what's actually going on. So actually, Ms. Raquel helped us with developing the topic today and looking at what we call collective trauma and how trauma can impact a nation and a people and the world and the effects that this is going to have on future generations as well. So I think this is a great topic for all of us to look at, not only as professionals but as our students that are here working in the field as well.
I certainly appreciate it because I think when we look at things sometimes in the classroom and academic sort of theory-based approach, we rarely get to appreciate how sometimes it's actually unfolding right in front of your eyes and this is what is happening now. Yeah. Before we ask the students sort of a brief intro, if they would of themselves just quickly, Ms. Raquel, from that perspective though, as a practicing clinician sometimes it is challenging. Your clientele will come in and it may be the impact on them, on their extended families, it may be economically, they may feel in frustration with their jobs, they may feel concerned about the housing and how they pay for it, and then their health concerns. It is sometimes probably overwhelming.
Very much so. This topic was something that I really wanted to choose because having worked in this field throughout this pandemic, I'm seeing people who have never had mental health problems before. And they're like, yeah, and I did okay for 6 months of this, 9 months, a year. And then they're like, and I'm just at my breaking point. And so I think, we often handle our stress really well when it's time limited and we've got the resources to cope. And I'm sure like many of us, we just didn't expect this to go on this long. My wishful thinking, at the beginning, I scheduled a teleconference for 2 months. And then that 2 months was up and I was like, oh, I'm going to do 2 more months. And then that 2 months was up and I was like, and it's indefinite.
Yeah.
And that's when, our resilience and our ability to cope with these ongoing stressors becomes something more. Yeah. And it's not just anxiety, it's not just depression, it's this is bigger.
And I certainly would, invite the students from, I guess, the academic theory-based classroom setting, and even as you wish, your sort of real-world view and even experience yourselves, your families. For me, as Ms. Raquel has shared, hey, we're resilient, we have great resolve, we're okay. For maybe 11 months, 11 and a half months, 11 months and, 29 days. And on that day, boom, you feel this thing. So maybe we can see that so people get an understanding that it is all about us and how it's affected. Maybe first, Kabira, we invite you to share your initial thoughts, a brief intro if you wish, and then Ms. Sabria, perhaps you after. So Ms. Palmer, welcome.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kabira Palmer. I'm a first-year social work student at UCCI.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Ms. Seymour, welcome, good afternoon.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Sabria Seymour. I am also a first-year social work student at UCCI. Yes.
And thank you so much for accepting the invitation to join us. Now, Dr. Watt, this is where, when we look at the practice, you and your colleague, Ms. Raquel, you're in the field. Just two students now eventually will be complementary as they go through, whether it's clinical psychologists like yourself, whether it's clinical social workers, or whether it is people like me trying to be of some value by facilitating discussions so the wider public start to appreciate that, as Raquel said, this is about all of us affected in ways that we probably never in the past imagined was possible. So from that perspective, Dr. Barton, how the listening public, when they hear this discussion and appreciate that mental health is health, just a qualifying, word before it.
Yeah. No, I think that this is because you're having not only the acute and the short term difficulties that people are dealing with, but also the longer term now, as Ms. Raquel was talking about, where we've really had to shift gears to be able to get to maintain it. This has become a marathon. This is no longer a sprint. And I think that requires different kinds of coping skills, different resources, and different supports going through it as well. It's really interesting, actually, if you look at even the research that has been coming out, because that's why I was checking my articles, because even the research has pointed in different directions as it has gone on longer. Articles from 2020 were a bit different than the ones that were written last year, which are different than the ones that are coming out this year as well. Because not only do we have the pandemic as well, there's a lot of other stuff going on as well. So collective trauma is something that I often had learned about in school, and that's something that we'll talk about when we look at anything that is kind of affects like a nation, right? So we've had discussions before on things like Ivan, in history, looking at some of the wars. Like there's these massive things that leave imprints on a nation, on people, on a people. But even now, there's a lot of other things that are going on. I think because of the stress of the pandemic, we're now having what they're calling cascading traumas, which is actually not a term I'd heard before, to be honest. I'm not sure if that was around. But looking at the other things that have come from the pandemic. We had obviously some big natural disasters here right before the pandemic.
The election.
The dump fire is a
natural
disaster.
The election.
That was a big one too.
Sorry. I should be here.
And the earthquake and the tsunami, but in the States with the Black Lives Matter movements and the riots that were going on there and the riots that happen around the world, to now obviously with the possible impending war going on. There's a lot of other things that are now coming as people are being worn down and resiliency is getting more difficult as we're moving forward. So there's other stressors now on top of the pandemic as well.
And Ms. Raquel, I certainly want you to sort of guide us in this, because it's an interesting topic, and I think back to the media. Now, I don't mean to be the absolute critic of the media. And I remember a class in university way back when I had hair. That's a long time ago. We did an analysis of the media and how the media portrays things, and it always intrigued me because I would look at the news and watch the newscast, her eyes, his eyes, the way the hands would move, and I thought, there, he didn't agree with what he just said, but he was reading the thing. Now, my friends would say, well, you're just weird. I said, well, we got out of the way. Now we've seen that there are biases, there are presentations. The Haiti earthquake, how that affected all of us, our children, here, because we were watching it constantly. Ms. Raquel.
So that's really interesting because, like, very early on in this pandemic, and throughout some of the traumas that we've had in the last couple of years, one of the things that we started talking about with our patients was, like, you need social media breaks. You need to take a break from the media because it is adding to your level of distress. And it's not like there's a fine line between you want to stay informed and you want to know what's going on, and you are adding to your own anxiety and distress by being like so wrapped up in what's happening. And unfortunately, like, our media has changed a lot. Like, I'd like to say I'm not that old, but
go ahead, girl. You tell yourself that.
I'm not that old. But you know, like, when I was younger, it wasn't accessible. We didn't walk around with computers in our pockets and 24/7 access to a stream of images. Things didn't get transmit this way. Social media literally didn't exist. And so to have that sort of access where it's like, you can see things from all over the world from 100 different points of view, 1,000, 1,000,000 points of view. And it's almost kind of flooding to be in it all the time. And the research is starting to actually reflect that as well, is that our access to media and to images, stories, while it's beneficial, it's also really problematic for our mental health.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that. So for clarity, when I said the election, I meant the U.S. election. That was the kicking point. I just thought we had one now. But no, the reason why, because I think Ms. Raquel's point, the media and the way sometimes there is a self-fulfilling prophecy. But we will look at something, and then that thing leads to another thing, and then always a confirmation bias, you call it. It's not necessarily that it's accurate, but you keep seeing the same thing at a different perspective. So, Ms. Palmer, from that perspective, young people, apparently, their devices and them are one and the same. Is that true?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's true. Well, at least for me.
Okay, just hang on, Ms. Palmer. I'm going to correct you. You might perhaps get that
So
one
I can
there.
do this one instead?
Yeah, let's see if that one. Pull the one to your left down. Sorry about that. Hey, you know what? All mics look alike. Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, Mike Jackson.
Is this better?
Is that better for all? No? Yes, Mom. All right.
Okay. Well, at least for me, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily attached to my devices. Or at least I would hope that I'm not that attached to my devices. But I do agree with what you're saying, that everything that's going on and the way that the media reports it can have a very damaging effect on our mental health. Because I remember during the heights of the Black Lives Matter movement, it was very hard for me to put down my phone. You know, you're seeing all these videos about the protests, you're reading all these articles, all these people having differing opinions, and just all of this content, and our brains are not wired to absorb all of this content and to be constantly plugged into everything that's going on. And because you're seeing everything that's happening around you or in your social space, it starts to stress you out, especially with the pandemic. Because I remember one thing that I was really concerned about, I was like, all these people are in these small spaces and they're all congregating, and most of them don't have on masks, so COVID is going to spread even more. And these are all the thoughts that were going through my head at the time. And it was really depressing. And I really just had to take a break and be like, okay, if something comes up, I'm just going to scroll by it. I'm not going to read it. It's not going to positively impact me. It's just going to negatively impact me. And even though it's important to stay informed, it's also important to take a break and realize that your mental health is important.
It is. All right, so when we take this break, to get our mental health break, when we come back, certainly Ms. Seymour, a perspective, and then Ms. Raquel, the notion, how this affects us, how we are affected by it, and then how that impact on us impacts those around us. You can see the strain on our relations, spouses, children, siblings, and the like. All right, 949-8037, or toll free with the compliments of Flo at 1-800-534-8255. If you want to join the discussion, pose a question, clarify a comment, or just, wish us something good and bring chocolate. Hey, that works too. Stay tuned for Talk Today.